So how are you coming with chapters 22 and 23? I wouldn't be surprised if you're having a bit of difficulty. Here we are almost in the middle of Dickens' novel, and suddenly we're taking this detour to learn what at first glance may seem to be some pretty unimportant details about Matthew Pockett's family. I can sympathize if that's your thinking, because I myself thought that a little bit as I read these chapters. However, one of the things about great novels is that they seldom waste time on material that isn't really of some significance. So I find myself asking, what is the significance of Matthew Pockett's family to Dickens in the scheme of his novel? And the first thing I think about is that Matthew Pocket is, we know, a somewhat significant character. Why is that? Well, he's the one character who stood up to Miss Havisham and warned her about the bad marriage she was about to enter. And as a result, he's been banished from the family. So the image we have of him from the very beginning is of one of the more honorable individuals, the more honest individuals in the novel. And he's certainly not a humbug, and he's certainly not a toady. Now, the interesting thing about meeting his family and meeting Matthew Pocket in these two chapters is that, at least for me, he comes off very differently than I might have expected. Given that he, up to now, sort of acting off stage, has seemed to us to be someone who is very honorable and decent and perhaps thoughtful, I would have expected him to be a character that was perhaps, well, let's say that he perhaps had his act together a little better. Instead, what do we find? We find that Matthew Pocket is a man who is somewhat overwhelmed by his family life. He's sort of harassed, harried, he's overwhelmed, and I wonder if that too has some significance. If Dickens is not telling us that a person's character does not always lead to that person being someone who is in control of his life and has everything together, but that nonetheless the basic goodness shines through. So the idea is that the basic goodness of Matthew Pocket shines through and doesn't necessarily, though, change the fact that he has to deal with life like everyone else. So there's some interesting thoughts here about Dickens' idea about goodness in a person and also his idea about family life. And I think we could also go a little bit, take another couple of steps as we look at the family life of the Pockets with its sort of chaos, but nonetheless some elements of happiness as the kids are constantly playing, and compare that to the life that Pip had as a boy when he was being raised by hand by Mrs. Gargery. So these are just a couple of thoughts on these two chapters. Take them as you will. Again, these are not two chapters that we need to spend a great deal of time concentrating on, and we're going to sort of move forward. I'll have some further thoughts on the blog that I'll add later, and some vocabulary words. And since I happen to be recording this on Thanksgiving Day, just a few hours before I sit down to my Thanksgiving dinner, I want to wish you all again a very happy Thanksgiving. Bye.